Hi, and welcome to the Choose FI Foundation's Educational Speaker Series, where we take topics from the Choose FI Foundation's pre-K through 12 financial literacy curriculum and break it down with expert speakers in the area to bring a little bit more information and ideas to the topic. Hope you enjoy it.
Hey everyone, this is Rob Phelan. I'm here with Josh Stine. He is CEO of Seat Insiders and also a financial coach with Organized by Josh. Josh, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing awesome. So, two businesses. Tell us a brief snapshot of what is Seat Insiders and obviously kind of how has it been affected in the current climate.
Yeah, so Seat Insiders, I'm CEO and founder of. It's an event ticket agency. So we sell tickets to events all over the world. As you can imagine, business is pretty slow right now
Yeah.
with events being canceled for the past 2 months. And so we're fighting for survival, but, we're hopeful that fans will be able to return to events, maybe this fall. But, we don't know what's going to happen. So we're prepared, for the worst financially, and we just hope for the best. And my side business, which is quickly becoming my full-time priority right now, is my financial coaching business called Organized by Josh. I help people save more money, get out of debt, invest more, learn how to earn more income, all kinds of different things. And so, no matter what your financial goal is, I try to help you achieve it. So that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. And coaches are in so many different aspects of our lives. So we think of a sports coach, we think of vocal coaches. Like you can have a money coach as well. Like if you hadn't heard of it before, it is a thing that happens. It helps people who basically coach you through how to manage your money and get towards the goals that you want to achieve. All right. So that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about pet ownership. So completely different pivot on what we Seat Insiders or financial coaching. We want to talk about having a pet. So we think of like a cat, a dog, a rabbit, any other domestic animal that could potentially be in a house. There is so much like kind of uncertainty about how much an animal actually costs. So in a recent survey, 68% of households have a pet in their house, but over 80% of them underestimate how much that pet actually costs them every year. So this is from the ASPCA that in the first year of owning a cat or a dog, like you're going to spend more than $1,000 on this animal, and most people are estimating under 500. So do those numbers kind of line up with what your experience has been?
Not at all. Definitely much lower than even the first 2 months. Keep in mind we just got a puppy 2 months ago, but yeah, it's a lot of times these numbers are significantly lower than what they actually end up being. So, you want to prepare for that financially if you do decide to get a pet.
Okay, so a little puppy. You said you got him 2 months ago?
Yeah, so we got a miniature golden doodle from a professional breeder.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, this is a very in-demand breed right now, especially in the DC area. A lot of people want these dogs. They're very hard to find as well. And it's very hard to find a truly professional breeder. So we have, he'll get to about 20 pounds, but yeah, he's a mini, or what they call a micro mini golden doodle. And so he's amazing, but very expensive, to do it the right way. And so he ended up costing us, I believe it was $22.50, and you have to put a deposit in months in advance to even be eligible to, get one of these dogs. And there's actually basically a draft of the puppies, and so you based on when you deposit, you get priority as far as pick, and so you're not necessarily guaranteed a boy or a girl. We wanted a boy, we got a boy, but yeah, it was a very long process that we had planned as soon as we moved back from living in Europe last year. And so we had this as a goal when we got back, and so now we have a little baby.
Okay, so good to hear that this was something you guys thought about. It wasn't like, oh, quarantine happened, we're stuck at home, let's get a puppy. So That's a good thing. I like hearing that. This should always be a decision that we plan out, we think about. It's a big decision to have, as you described it. This is your little baby. Like, you are introducing a new life into your household, and it's a big responsibility that comes with that. It's not something that kind of be decided overnight or very flippantly. So you talked about getting a dog from a breeder. Now, that's not the only way you can get a dog. So
Yes,
dog or
correct.
cat, like you can acquire these a lot of different ways. What are some other ways that we can get our animal in the beginning?
So adoption is obviously very, it's the much more ethical option, and because you're saving another dog that needs a home, and there are fees and costs associated with that, but they're a lot of times cheaper. There's obviously uh, pet stores as well, which personally I'm not a fan of, but
Mhm.
it is an option. You have to do your research, knowing what kind of life has the pet had before, because you could sign yourself up for a lot of significant medical costs if you don't know anything about that pet, or where what kind of life it had previously. So these are all things that you want to consider, and you need to also look at the breed and what is their life expectancy, things like that. And so there's a lot of things to consider, whether you want to buy, adopt. You can also help foster dogs as well, even if maybe you're not necessarily want to have a dog for 15 years, but you can help foster a dog and raise it, and then help find it a home. So there's a lot of options. I think for people at different that have different kinds of budgets, and depending on how much they want to spend, uh, you can get whatever you want.
Yeah.
So
So it again is something that you can put a lot of thought into, you can put no thought into, and the people who put more thought into it are hopefully going to at least reduce the chances of unexpected events happening. So like the positives for going to a breeder are that you get a history of the parents of the dogs, you know that it's coming from a particular environment. You can probably follow and see like, okay, what kind of environment was this? How was the dog raised? What are the temperament of the parents like? And you hopefully get a better idea of what you're going to get coming out of this versus if you go to adopt from a shelter, you're usually getting an animal who has a past history of previous owners, and you don't know what that's like. You don't know if there's any trauma for the animal, how they're going to react. You very often don't get a health history because we don't really know much about these animals. So it's pros and cons on both sides, but like you said, you could potentially be saving an animal from a bad situation. Or even if it's just like a friend, family member, somebody is like, I cannot take care of my animal anymore, would you be willing to take it over? Like that you know a little bit about it. There are lots of ways to adopt that first pet, whatever way you choose to do it. All right, so you said beyond just the adoption fee or the buying fee, there are a lot of costs involved. What
mhm.
else goes into, like, you're a first time pet owner, so I'm assuming this is your first dog.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it didn't have like any of the stuff you needed beforehand. Like, this is you're kind of starting from beginning. It's like having your first baby, I will say.
Yeah, starting from scratch, and it's the first thing though. Obviously, you have to buy lots of toys. A crate if it's a dog. Our dog doesn't like
Even a
toys.
cat, you usually got to have a crate to carry them to and
Yes,
from a vet.
to take it to the vet. Yeah. Collars, leashes, all that kind of stuff that is a one-time purchase. You have to buy that stuff before you get the dog, because it needs to all be ready, by the time you bring them home. And so you have that I think we spent close to $300 on all of that, just in the first month, like before we even got
Mm-hmm.
Leo. And so we had to put all that money up front, in addition to saving and budgeting for, we ended up paying so we pay the deposit months in advance, and then we pay actually when we pick up the dog, that full, uh, the rest was $2,000. And so we had to budget for that accordingly every month, so we don't have this huge expense come March. So yeah, the other big upfront costs, right when you're getting a puppy, especially, is you have to go to the vet, and you have to complete all their vaccinations. Uh, you know, most breeders, specifically the ones we work with, they also require you to, have the dog tested, for heartworms, any kind of medical issues up front, because you need to alert them otherwise. Some breeders actually offer refunds, if they do find like a health defect, things like that. So it's something to actually check for when you're spending that kind of money on a dog. Not everybody offers any kind of refund or, any kind of guarantee on the dog. So we spent probably by now over $600 in the first 2 months, just from vet checkups and tests. It does get significantly cheaper, once they get a little bit older, but we're going every 3 or 4 weeks now. So it's something we budget for. Oh, we have the vet, it's actually on Monday. I think we go to the vet again, and it's going to be another $200+. But after that, it's like 3-4 visits. It starts to, mellow out, as long as the dog is healthy, he's not having any problems. We're expecting about $200 to $400 annually in vet expenses.
Okay.
So it's something you definitely need to consider is the vet, because that's one of the first places they're going to go when you bring home, your new pet.
Yeah, so it's not just about we need to feed, said dog or cat. Like there are so many other costs involved, and the vet is a big one. And particularly in the first year of having a cat or dog, like that you are going to have more vet bills as you get them their specific shots. You do a different couple of different tests on them. If you found a cat or dog, especially like you are rescuing one from somewhere, like you probably do have a lot of medical expenses you're going to have to take care of. What's the food cost for a dog roughly? Like, and I know he's going to get bigger, so probably food cost is going to go up as they get older, but like starting out, like how much does a dog cost to keep fed?
We're looking at around $25 a month.
Mm-hmm.
It could change obviously as he becomes a dog and not a puppy, but eats a ton. So we're kind of setting that aside. It could be less, could be a little bit more. Other things, that kind of go along with the vet that are basically, unavoidable is prescriptions and any kind of preventative medication. So, like flea and tick, heartworms, all these kinds of things that are preventative, ultimately they will save you money, long term, and you need to do them, especially if your dog is going to be around other dogs, or it's going to be, out in the woods and rolling around in the grass. Like you do not want your dog to have to deal with any kind of medical emergency, because ultimately it's going to cost you more in the long run. It's just like yourself, us as people, we do preventative things, right? And it saves us money long term. But so we're budgeting for prescriptions and preventative medications about $200 annually. And so we think it's a rough estimate right now. I mean, he's gotten a lot of his stuff already for the year, and there's things that he does take monthly. And so, but thankfully it's not too expensive for these things, and long term it can save you money. So
Yeah, and then what about the unexpected health expenses that might come up? Is that something that you guys consider in a budget, or do you have like just this is our household emergency fund? So like, if you had a health emergency, it would probably come out of your emergency fund. Do you kind of do the same thing for a dog or a cat, or do you just say we're going to make a separate emergency fund for cat or dog?
So we are big believers in pet insurance, and we'll get into that. But normally, we pull if he had an emergency for some reason, we'd pull it out probably of from our emergency fund. I have well over 6 months of living expenses saved, and that kind of factors also in, now having a puppy. So we're fine there, and we don't expect anything, of course, but we have the money if needed. We're not going to put this on a credit card and pay debt just to make sure he gets the care he needs. But the backup plan is, we also have pet insurance, and so this is a whole different world. But for us, pet insurance, it gives us that peace of mind. You know, if there is an emergency, say he falls down the stairs and he breaks his leg or he gets bit by another dog and you got to take him in, and you might not be able to see the normal vet. So you have to go to the ER, you know, the pet ER. And so those can be extremely, extremely expensive bills. I've heard upwards of $1,500 a night just for the pet to stay, you know, there, because in a city like Arlington, Virginia, right outside of DC, it's very, very expensive. You know, space is a premium. And so some of these things do cost more for me than it would cost in a lower cost of living area. But, you know, pet insurance it's for that peace of mind. And for some providers, the earlier you get it, the cheaper it will be long term. And so we ended up going with Trupanion. They're really one of the market leaders in pet insurance. And what we liked about them is that the earlier you get your pet on insurance, they try to keep your premium, your monthly premium, the same for the life of the pet.
Kind of like a
Other
term life insurance
providers,
policy sort of thing.
kind of, yeah, kind of. You know, and it does have an annual deductible, but you know, ultimately, if you get like a $2,000 bill, you know, you've paid your monthly premiums, and you're going to only have to pay a small deductible versus having to use up a bunch of your emergency fund.
Yeah.
So it really depends. I think, you know, a lot of people that adopt, they really like pet insurance too, because they don't know what medical conditions or what their history was. And so, again, like I was mentioning before, you could be signing yourself up for significant medical expenses annually for a pet you don't necessarily know that much about initially. And so getting it early on, I think, pays, but you have to look at the details of whatever coverage you're signing up for, just like health insurance, because it may seem like a good deal at first, but it's really all about, you know, what are the details of the plan.
Yeah. It's not just about a cheap or expensive premium. It's all about like the things that are covered. What happens if different types
Yep.
of emergencies happen? Are the things that are not covered? Do you know about that? Are there
Yeah.
like in-network, out-of-network kind of things like health insurance as well? Like all those things that we think about when we talk about insurance.
Yeah. And some people get the pet insurance also to cover some of the vet expenses, but we did not select that. Ours is purely for emergency
Gotcha.
purposes. You know, you'd pay a much higher premium if you wanted to cover any kind of vet bills or prescriptions. And to us, it didn't make sense financially once you looked at the differences in cost. So, you know, it's definitely something to consider, especially, you know, if you're spending a lot on your dog or cat.
Yeah, and also like going back to one thing you said, like you have 6 months of household expenses put aside, and the person who has a healthy emergency fund gets to do something like this. You're essentially taking on part of the insurance yourself. You're self-insuring to an extent
Yep.
because you can say, you know what, if we have to go to the vet unexpectedly, we can cover it. Like we don't need insurance to pay all of it. So we can reduce that premium. We can take on some of the risk ourselves because we've got the cash to do it. So if you're in that position, well, great, absolutely do it. If you're not, you know, then you might want to consider like a full coverage sort of insurance plan so that if things do come up, they are covered and you know the cost ahead of time and you can budget for it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think another area to talk about, just because we have a puppy, our plans did get changed because of coronavirus. But
Mm-hmm.
initially, before we even got him, we also signed up for puppy class, so training. And you know, you have to reserve this a month or two in advance, because, you know, good trainers are in high demand where we live. So we initially did a $200 like intro class. It's like for 6 weeks of training, so like once per week. And you know, $200 you know, to teach him basic things. But we were not able to do that, and we got a refund. But you know, because it's not an essential business. But advanced classes can cost much more than that. You could be paying up to $500 you know, for a class after they complete their intro. Depending on the breed, they also may need it That's another thing like to consider when you're looking at breeds of dogs, is, you know, how trainable are they? And because you could spend thousands of dollars trying just to get your dog to do basic things such as sit and you know, stay and basic things. But so we're self-teaching right now using YouTube, which I would recommend honestly. But again, it depends on the breed. But so we're saving $200. You know, one day would we do classes? Sure. But the other thing too is like if your dog does need really specialized training, you could be paying upwards of $125 per hour. So if you want to work directly with a professional, you should expect to pay um, a pretty significant premium. So it does pay to really, I think, spend time with your dog, build that relationship, and see what you can teach them on your own. Because I'm a big believer in you know, using YouTube to learn different things, and I think
Absolutely.
you can teach some of the basics. There's a lot of really good tutorials out there, so definitely you know, do some googling and check out YouTube.
Flip side, look at that for our business, $125 an hour for something that probably does not require any sort of college degree. So just
Yeah.
another possible career path that if you love animals, you like working with dogs, you know, dog training, there it is. All right, so like, going through our list of expenses, um, let's think about like, I'm thinking like a car, like what's the maintenance costs on an animal?
So you got grooming, and depending on the breed and the size of the dog, it varies widely. You know, thankfully we have a smaller dog who's, you know, hopefully will be lower maintenance. But you know, you have to have their nails trimmed. You got to have them cleaned. Depending on the breed, they might need, you know, their haircut. There's so, I mean, it's just like a human. People, I mean, some people have dental care for their dog as well, so they get the dog's teeth clean. We brush our dog's teeth and just, you know, look at them, but he's also going to lose most of his teeth over the next month anyway. So, but those can be very expensive, you know, to have a dog dentist. But yeah, grooming can really vary. We're planning on spending, if we end up doing it, I mean, we'll try and do some ourselves, but it could range up to $100 per visit. And you know, for some dogs, they need to go more often based on how much hair they have or how fast nails grow, things like that. But you know, this could cost you up to $400 a year if you go just 4 times.
Yeah.
So it's something to consider. Some people take their dog every month. You know, not us, but it all depends on how much you value, you know, your pets and what you want to give them.
Yeah.
So, um,
And like a
I'm
human,
not.
there is the option to DIY it. Like you can
Oh
learn to do it
yes.
yourself. Like when we had a cat, my wife and I had a cat. She passed away last year, but we were able to trim claws ourselves. So we got the tool that was needed to do it, and she was thankfully a very cooperative cat and would let us do it. And same with grooming. Like there were things that we could do, so we didn't necessarily have to take her every single time. But I would definitely encourage you guys to think about, okay, what can I DIY and what can I not?
Yeah, and the key is starting early too,
Mhm.
and you'll find that in YouTube tutorials. But like, you know, trimming nails is something you should be able to do yourself, and the earlier you start it, the better, because you want to get them used to it. And we're starting by doing nails like, you know, every couple of days we do a couple. We give them treats after every nail we clip as well. You need to reward the good behavior, and so that's what we're doing. And it's a battle, you know, at first, but eventually the goal is to get them used to these good behaviors, so that, you know, maybe you can save some money on these kinds of things. They don't have to go to the professional.
Yeah. I saw a woman the other day who basically was slathering peanut butter on her forehead so the dog would lick the peanut butter while she could get in there and clip its toenails. But it was like a Great Dane, so it was like
Ah,
a much larger project.
oh yeah.
Okay, so when we think about maintenance, a big one as well is exercise. And you know, dogs require like somebody to actually help them exercise. Cats, this is probably where cats can get that kind of lower maintenance, um, like a stereotype, because cats will often take care of that themselves. Like they will roam, they'll go whatever. You don't necessarily have to take a cat out for a walk, but dogs got a lot of energy. They need to go out and be walked, need to be exercised. And if you are a busy person and you can't do it yourself, now this is another cost you got to think about, because we got dog walkers, which is a great industry for teens, by the way. So yeah, what are you guys doing? I'm assuming you're taking care of yourselves because you are currently home with quarantine, but is that something that you're going to have to think about in the future?
No, we'll never consider it.
Okay.
But I work from home. I've worked from home for 5 years now, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. We initially, like, my part of my other job was going to be, taking care of this dog, taking it out all the time, and then coronavirus came, right? Um, but around here, where we live in the DC area, a dog walker can cost up to $40 per hour. And so, if you're busy, you commute to an office every day. Obviously, probably not doing that right now, but if you wanted to have a dog walker, it could cost you up to $200 per week if you had the person come, all 5 days. And so, and especially if it's a puppy, they need to go out more than just once. During the middle of the day, they have very small bladders, and so unless you want to clean up huge messes every night when you come home from work, this could be a significant cost, that you want to consider. But thankfully, it's not one we need to have. But for a lot of people here in the DC area, they work very, a lot. They're not home maybe that much. And so dog walker actually makes a lot of sense because they don't want their dog to sit in a crate all day.
No, and there's
So
a whole industry for, like, you think of child minding where parents have to drop kids off to a daycare. There's doggy daycare too. Like, there are some people who will take their dog, they'll drop off to daycare in the morning and pick it up in the evening when they're coming home from work. And I can only imagine how much that one costs too.
it's actually pretty reasonable. It could run about $40 a day.
Hmm.
There's packages like you could get like a full month at like a much discounted rate, but that's another thing. It's like boarding and kennel. It's not a cost we have, thankfully, but if we did, the place where we would take it would be $60 per day for both the day and the night. So they charge for the day up to a certain amount of hours, and then for the night. And so if you do both, you do get a little bit of a discount. But for full 24 hours, $60 per day. So if you want to go on vacation, it would be $420 a week.
Yeah, so you think about the cost of that vacation, you're like, oh yeah, like the flights are, maybe $200 or $300, the hotel, maybe another 120, $200. That's not your total cost, because now you suddenly got this other, living creature in your house that needs to be taken care of during that time. So they're either coming with you or they're staying behind. And if they're staying behind, um, you know, is there somebody who can take care of them that will do it for free, or do you have to pay somebody to come into your house to feed them, walk them, let them go to the bathroom, whatever it is, or do you have to put them in a boarding slash kenneling situations where you take them to a location that they can stay during the time that you're gone? So yeah, a lot of different costs depending on how much care is needed, how often they need to be cared for, and so on. I imagine a puppy might cost more maybe than an adult dog, or do they just do like a flat fee for that sort of stuff?
It's a flat
Okay.
fee, so that's a good thing. And if you do have more than one pet, you do get a discount. But again,
Mm.
your costs are rising very, very quickly, especially if you have two dogs, because now you have to double a lot of these expenses. But yeah, you mentioned like flying or traveling with pets, and that's right now obviously not a problem for most people because we're stuck at
Yeah.
home. But flying with a pet can be very, very expensive and very challenging. It can also be, depending on the size of the dog, they also may not be available or allowed, to go on the plane. And so you need to consider, like, it could be very traumatizing experience for your pet to fly. So that's why a lot of people do boarding, kennels, things like that, having dog walkers. But basically, to fly with your pet, it's $125 each way for most US airlines. That cost goes up if you want to do international. So, if you like to travel, definitely consider these costs, because you could be adding, basically almost doubling your vacation budget just from having a dog. once you factor in all of these things.
And you haven't even gotten to your location yet. Like what happens when you get to your destination? You go to a hotel and there could be an extra fee for having a pet there if they allow pets at all. So you could end up restricting your choices to more expensive hotels or locations that aren't exactly where you want to be. Or you go to a city and are they pet friendly? Like, do you have to have somebody stand outside with your dog every time you go into a store or a restaurant? Or like, there's just so many things you have to consider when you travel, right?
Absolutely. You know, the extra fees are very common for most of the big hotel chains, and so I don't know if we'll take Leo with us on some of our trips, because it could add just a huge cost. And you know, we typically fly, but it could be $20, $40, $50, $100 a night extra on top of what you're already paying. But thankfully, there are a few hotel chains that have they don't have any fees for pets, and they actually will accommodate them. They have like beds and they give treats. It's very cool, actually. I think it's a differentiator. But I know Aloft, Kimpton, Motel 6, and Red Roof Inn were all chains that I found just researching. They don't have pet fees at all. So something to consider. You know, maybe doesn't help you internationally, but it does definitely help you in the US if you're doing a road trip. Maybe this is something to consider, you know, to just save a little bit of money. But yeah, I don't know. We're very fortunate in that you know, Leo can always come visit his grandparents, and you know, they're very close by, and they also have a red miniature poodle here. So we, you know, he can always come over here and stay. So we don't
hang out with his friend.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of these expenses. And you know, chances are you're probably close to one of your friends or family. You know, maybe you guys can arrange a deal, you know, take care of each other's pets. You know,
Good way of thinking about it.
when
Like a kind
when
of
you want to go on trips. Yeah, so it's just you have to think outside the box with some of these things, because if you just do the standard approach here, you're going to spend thousands of dollars a year on all these things. So
yeah, and kind of just we're sort of entering into the accommodation side. A lot of you guys who are going to be graduating high school, going off to college, or starting off in your careers, I would imagine very few of you are going to be in your like owning a home in the beginning. So if you're living at home, it's one thing, but if you're venturing out on your own, most people are typically renting when they start. And a thing to consider is if you are renting, in some cases, there's just a no pet policy. A lot of landlords are like, you know what, I don't want to have to deal with a pet potentially damaging a house or soiling carpets or whatever it is. There's also allergy concerns. So like if the next person coming in after you is allergic to cats or dogs, like there could be an issue with that. Or if you're in an apartment building, in my case, when we had our first apartment, we were on the top floor and you were not allowed to have a pet that weighed more than, I think it was 50 pounds on the top floor, just because it would make so much noise. So there are things to consider like that when it comes to like what's next in your journey. And in our apartment, there was a $50 fee for having our cat. So there's a pet fee on top of the rent as well. So just be aware of that that's another just hidden cost that comes with having a pet that maybe you wouldn't have considered in the first place. So did you have anybody you went to college with that like had a pet while in college?
thankfully, no. But I you know, I knew people that did. It's like, how, you know, how does that work? You know, do your roommates, you know, are they on doggy duty during certain hours? Like it's, and you know, where do you find a place to live? Because student rentals are notoriously very strict. I went to Penn State, and student rental, you know, private student rentals off campus are extremely expensive, and pets are just, yeah, I mean, they'd laugh at you if
It's
you
pretty much
asked.
a flat no. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, not something you want to do, and something you want to research. But you know, you just need to really look at the numbers ultimately. You know, you're there to get an education, and you know, hopefully have a great opportunity, you know, when you leave college. And maybe that's the time, you know, to consider a dog or a pet or whatever you want to do. But just these are all expenses you have to consider. And the other thing that you were talking about, Rob, was like, you know, the restrictions, right? You might pay a monthly fee on top of your rent, but some places actually will only let you have a pet of a certain size. And so we actually live in one of those buildings. It's a condo building, and the homeowners association says you can only have a pet up to 25 pounds. If you go over that, it's just straight up, you can't have it.
Mm.
So, you know, these are all things that you need to research, you know, before you even think about, okay, I want to adopt, I want to get this dog. You need to know and really plan for the future.
Yeah, and that's the thing that just it comes back to that very first I guess conversation we had about you have to think about these things. It can't be spur of the moment. I had a not a close friend, but someone in my course in college, and she smuggled a kitten into her like dorm building. Like adopted a kitten. I don't know where she got it from, like, but it was hers, not like her family's, and she brought it to college. Was not supposed to have it. The college found out, and she got slapped with a pretty heavy fine. I think was kicked out of that dorm as well, and was pretty much told like either you get rid of the cat or you're not allowed to stay in a dorm. And you know, you get emotionally attached, to your pets, so it's a very hard thing to for her to do. And I think it ended up going and living with her family. But it's a big decision, guys. It's a big responsibility, and I want to make sure that we're being very clear. Like this is a large burden that you're going to take on, or an ethical responsibility that you're going to have to this animal. Like it's not like, oh, it's not working out, I'm just going to like return it, send it back. Like you don't get to do that. If a health expense comes up, it's you're responsible for this animal now. You don't really get to say, oh, it's not in the budget this month, sorry bud, you're going to have to hold that broken leg for another month or two. um, Make sure you're thinking about that. Like you have responsibility to this animal when you take them on. All right, we've talked about a lot of costs. What are the positives to owning a pet? Is there anything good about it? Like why would you do it?
It's amazing, right? You know, it's, you know, we treat Leo, our puppy, like, you know, our baby, right? You
Mhm.
know, he means the world, right? And he brings us so much joy and compassion and love. And, you know, right now in the age of coronavirus, you know, we've been quarantining for 2 months now straight. You know, and you know, the news is not the most positive right now. The dog, you know, Leo is just, you know, can change everything, right? He comes up to you, he starts kissing you, and you know, say, oh, I need pet, you know, like all these things, right? So it's, to us, it's totally worth it. You know, all these expenses. You know, in long term, we're doing all the proactive things so that he's not going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars a year. But you know, there's so many benefits to it as well, as far as like your health. And so, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I could work 10 hours straight without moving, right? I could sit here on my computer, but now that I have my puppy, you know, I have to go outside, I have to take him out, he's got to walk, you know, he wants to play, he's an amazing distraction. You know, even, I mean, I'm dealing with a lot of really stressful situations in my companies right now, but it's, you know, he kind of reminds me that it's not as bad as you think it is, and it'll be okay, and also play with me. So um,
That's it. Like they make you healthier, they make you exercise more.
yeah,
93% of people report that if they have a pet, they just feel better about their life. 71% report feeling happier as a result of having a pet versus those who did not. So yeah, there is this like, it's hard to put a dollar figure on the benefits, like the return on investment for a pet. Like you don't really think of it that way, but it kind of is that you're getting something back out of this too. It's that companionship, that love, the person who, or person who like cares about you, wants your attention, wants to be around you, needs you to like, to coexist with them. Like it's a lot of different benefits that come with having a pet. And service animals, like we kind of hinted about, like flying with animals, like that's one reason why people do bring an animal on a plane, is that they're a service animal. Service animals can provide a lot of different benefits for people with a wide variety of health conditions, from physical health conditions to emotional to mental health conditions. And yeah, there's a lot of benefits to having pets, which are very well documented. So for our particular audience, our age group, what are some things we want to consider? So like, let's kind of wrap this up with like a checklist of like, what are things we should consider before we go down the path of getting a pet, and maybe some things we can try before we do that, just in case like it's our first pet and we're not really sure, like, all right, I want a dog, but I don't know if like I'm going to be the right person to be a dog owner? Like I need to find out before I go actually like adopt a dog and bring them into my house.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things to consider. I mean, we spent a lot of time on the financial obligations
Mm,
of, just how much it's going to cost, both monthly, annually, and the life of the pet. These are all things you need to first consider, because if you can't afford to take care of your pet, it's probably not the right time for you. Of course, it's different, if you're in a family and you all agree, this is the right move. Maybe it is more realistic. Maybe you guys can split the cost, so it's not super expensive. But other besides that, I mean, you need to consider what your daily schedule looks like. Does a dog or a pet, does that actually fit in to your schedule? If you're never home and you're working, you're in school, you go to work, or you have a sport team after school, who's going to take care of the dog during that time? I know when I was in high school, I had no time,
mm,
for a pet, and thankfully, my family, we all took our turns. But if it was just me, it's it's practically like I'm working a full-time job during the day, and I can't afford to have a dog walker and doggy daycare and all these things, even now. So doing it in high school or middle school, whenever, you know you need to think about what kind of life your pet
yeah.
is going to have. Do you want it to be in a crate all day? Definitely not, especially when they're a puppy, because they need your love and attention, and you need to spend as much time as you possibly can with them. And so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to think about, but
And just
ultimately you need to look at the financial obligations you're going to have, and also if you're going to be able to provide it the life that it deserves.
and this is part of a personal finance course. So Len, when we think about like can you afford it? Where in like I guess a hierarchy of a budget should this be coming in? Because now when we think about budgeting, we're like, okay, core expenses, your bills, things essential for living need to be taken care of. You need to pay yourself first in terms of your savings and investing. So like we're saying 20% savings investing, that's off the table from your net income. So your normal bills are taking up about 50%. If you've got 30% left over, like your animal is going to come out of that 30%. Like you can't say, okay, we're gonna shelve the saving investing because we're getting this new animal in our lives. So it has to make, you have to be able to afford it, but you also have to be able to keep building for your future. And particularly when you're younger, like time is your best friend when it comes to investing, growth, building wealth. And if you are sacrificing your investing potential to have a pet, like from a money standpoint, like you're going to potentially cripple yourself, for quite a period of time. So yes, it's different. It's not a car. Like this is a living animal. It brings so much more than like a car does. And I want to recognize those benefits, but at the same time, be very realistic about can you afford this, and is this the right time for you in your financial life to take on that kind of responsibility?
Absolutely.
All right. So we want to get our like we still want to get our feet wet. We want to figure it out. Um, I was thinking of this with you ahead of time. Like, so we could do some things like fostering as opposed to adopting. So fostering, you're taking temporary like care of a dog or cat, maybe they're in a shelter and you're just taking them out of the shelter environment while they are searching for a new owner. So it's a very temporary situation. You're just taking care of them and then they go off to their forever home afterwards. Hard to do if you get connected to an animal, but at the same time, it's a great way to try it out and see, okay, do I like having a cat or dog around? Also, are you allergic to them? That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize until they get a cat or dog. Are you actually allergic to them? You don't really realize it until you're around them 24/7. Um, do you enjoy the responsibilities on a wet, cold, rainy day? Are you still going to go take your dog out for a walk, or are you going to kind of brush it off? Like those are big questions to try and answer before you commit to this. A dog's life can be, I don't even know what an average dog's life is. I know our cat lasted for 17 years.
Wow.
So bigger cat, long life, but it's a big commitment.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Yeah. You can always volunteer. at your local animal shelters. You maybe you are in college, right? And you aren't allowed to have, a pet, in your apartment dorm room. So what you can do is go volunteer. You can still spend time, and most animal shelters need, volunteers desperately, especially right now. Of course, the circumstances are very extreme, but this is never going to go away, and animal shelters are always going to have, needs, whether that's just taking the dogs, for a walk, or petting the cats. Like they need the same attention that you know any other dog needs, and a lot of times they don't get it.
Yeah.
So you can be there for them.
We talked about a
Another,
couple of side hustles.
yeah,
So
side hustles, right? And so you could do dog walking. A lot of, if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be in a college town, maybe I'm going to be in a bigger city. There's a lot of people that just don't have the time to walk their dog as much as they want, or they just understand the value of you coming. You pick up the dog, walk it for 30 minutes. You might make $20 for all that work, and it gets you time and with a pet, but it also you'll build a connection too doing that. No different than volunteering. No different than having, raising, fostering pets as well, and so and you can make some money. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of feel like you have a pet, but don't maybe have all the financial obligations and having to take care of a pet 24 hours a day.
yeah, and pet sitting was another one that we talked about. So, an owner is looking to go on vacation, or they travel for work, or, in my area, like people commute to DC, and sometimes they go down to DC for the week, come back for the weekend. And there could be like either the weekend or the weekday where they're just like, I want somebody to, stay with my pet a little bit more often than just like take them for a walk. Like, so I want you to come hang out with them, play with them, spend a couple of hours with them. Like that's something you can do. You can house sit and pet sit. So someone goes on a vacation for 2 weeks and they want somebody to like take care of their house. They don't want to put their dog into a kennel for 2 weeks. They want them to be able to stay around home. So instead you come in and like you spend a lot of time in that house, make sure the house is taken care of, upkept, and then the animals are taken care of as well. And then it's also a really great hack for going on vacations. If you want to go on a vacation, you can look for house sits and pet sits in the location that you're going to. You can be like, all right, somebody's leaving to go on vacation. I'll watch your house and your pet, and in exchange for like either really low or no accommodation costs, because you're basically being responsible for a pet while you're on vacation, but you get free accommodation out of it.
Yeah, I've actually considered doing that. I never got to actually do it because I'm just too busy. But when I was living in Scotland last year, I did think, oh, wow, I could go stay in Italy for free if I watched somebody's dog, right? It's really cool. Not everybody has that opportunity, but, kind of the perks of being a remote-based entrepreneur. You do set your own schedule, and there's some really cool things you can do around travel. So definitely something to consider.
So Josh, any last advice for future pet owners out there?
No, I mean, we talked about a lot of different things, but I think it's totally a positive thing for us. It is expensive, and we definitely spent a lot initially, but the joy and just the love that we get out of our dog is amazing, and I think it's the same for millions of people. It's hard to put a price tag on that experience, and so, but just keep in mind all these things to consider, and I think you'll make the right decision.
Awesome. All right, Josh, thank you so much for your time. If anybody has like questions or they want to find you online, like where can they find you?
Easiest place to find me is at my coaching website. It's organizedbyjosh.com. You can always send me an email through there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks, Rob.